I'd once read this Lenin quote in a book by Maxim Gorky, where Lenin said to him, I don't want to listen to my favorite piece of music, the Appassionata by Beethoven anymore, because it makes me want to stroke people's heads and tell them nice things. And I have to smash in those heads to accomplish my revolution. And that quote kind of stuck with me, because it seemed one of those extreme examples of someone shutting out their own humanity and just going by principle. And so I thought about creating a film situation where I could force Lenin to listen to the Appassionata and thereby give history a different course. And Lenin turned into Ulrich Mühe, and the Appassionata into that beautiful piece that Gabriel Yaret wrote for our film. Once I had the basic idea for the structure of the story, I didn't start writing immediately. I spent 1.5 years just researching. That is, reading all the literature first about that period in history, about the East German secret police, about art in the GDR, and then I started meeting up with people who had experienced all that firsthand. And that was quite an emotional roller coaster ride, because one day I'd been meeting someone whose life had been destroyed by the Stasi, and the next day I would meet one of the Stasi officers who would tell me, not without pride, how they had gone about doing this. And so it was pretty taxing emotionally, but it was important for me to hear both sides, to be able to tell a balanced story. And when I'd reached that point where suddenly I was correcting people on details in their recollections of this, I knew, okay, well, look, now I know enough about this, and now I can start writing. And then I started actually writing the screenplay, which took me another 1.5 years, 5 drafts. I didn't select people because they were from East Germany, but somehow the project did attract mainly people from East Germany. I don't know, there's probably some karmic force guiding us there. Ulrich Mühe, the lead actor who plays Wiesler, he was from the East. I didn't actually know that he was from the East until I met him, and then he showed me his Stasi files at our first meeting. I thought that was a great, sign of trust. But he said, "Look, I know what story you're telling here. I know what you're talking about, and I know that this is how it was." And I was pretty impressed by that. And then he said, "Look, I'll show you my Stasi files," and he showed me some, pretty shocking things in that, which. He was under tight surveillance from the Stasi ever since he left high school, because even the Stasi knew that he was going to be big before he knew it, actually. And so they had him under tight surveillance, and even when he then became a big theater star, there were 4 members of his theater group who were in that group as actors and assistant directors and things, simply to monitor him and to keep a tight watch on him, which they didn't do a very good job of, because he was he was one of the people who in 1989 held big speeches against the GDR leadership on the big square in Berlin. And I remember that he then asked me, this character Wiesler just sits on the attic all the time, and he's moved all the time by everything that he hears down there. How do I act that? How do I play that? And I said, maybe you don't have to act it. And then he said, okay, I'm going to do it. and that's one of the things I admire about him. He's an actor who really does play an act from the inside out. He doesn't fabricate something artificial just with craft. He's a real artist, and he searches in his soul for the part that that is in him that could be like that character, and then he plays from that spot in his soul. So it's real. He's one of those artists that really acknowledge the fact that everything is within us. That basic Jungian idea that all vices and all virtues are in our soul. We just decide what we let out. And the actor, the great actor, is that courageous individual that is willing to acknowledge the existence of that, and even search for maybe some dark parts of his soul and use those to give them to us mere mortals. The important thing in the structure of the screenplay was that I had written it so that he would start changing pretty much from the second scene onwards, and that he would change continuously, that it wouldn't be that one Damascus incident that would suddenly turn him from Saul into St. Paul. I don't believe that unless there's divine intervention, things actually happen that way. I think when people change, it is always a succession of events that all push that person to the same direction. And it's the same way here. He sees on the Stasi side that people aren't as true as he is. His friend and colleague, played by Ulrich Tukur, is making a far better career than he is, although he was always the one who helped Tukur with his homework and kept reminding him of what they were fighting for. But now he's a couple of ranks above him, because it's not really about communism for these people. And then he finds out that his sacred mission to uncover an enemy of the state is used to satisfy Central Committee members' lust for a woman. And again, he realizes that something is going wrong there. And on the other side, with the artist, he realizes, these people are not really the enemy that I've been taught to combat. These are normal people. These are people who have problems and have a normal life. And then there's that third level that basically he is experiencing art for the first time. This is a person who never listened to the kind of music that we would have listened to maybe even in our childhood. This is a person who has never read the great writers. And suddenly he is forced to experience that art. And I think that all that changes him. In terms of acting, his, I think, general character disposition does stay the same. He does stay, a meticulous and thorough person who, doesn't turn into this gregarious bohemian simply because his morals change. He changes only on a moral level, only from the inside. After I'd finished the screenplay, I knew that one of the main challenges would be to, create a world that people would actually want to watch for 2 hours and 17 minutes. And if I just created the kind of drab, completely realistic GDR, people wouldn't want to do that, or it would just be visually too exhausting. So I thought of something that people used to do a lot in American films too, actually, which was come up with a very clear color concept and a very clear palette of colors, and thereby create a visual world that was so consistent that it became beautiful. It's just like if you take a film like Indiana Jones, for example. That is a film with a clear and beautiful color concept, almost going so far as to have a texture concept. It's like, if you think of Indiana Jones, if you close your eyes and think, what colors do I think of? You see, the brown of Indiana Jones's hat and whip. That's one clear color. You see that kind of yellow sand, and you see maybe some kind of red that of a kind of desert sunset, and it's of those colors that that film is made up, and they stay with that pretty consistently. And so when you think back to that film, or when you feel back to that film, you actually have a special feeling, like they created a universe for you that you can go back to in your fantasies. And I wanted to do the same here. And so I thought, what can I show that that would still be true? And so with my production designer, with whom I spent about half a year developing that concept, we watched many films from the GDR. We looked at hundreds of photo books and searched in our own memories. And then I realized that basically there was not so much clear blue in the GDR and not so much red, and that maybe we would achieve an authentic GDR and a beautiful GDR by eliminating those colors altogether. And then I tried that out, just by cutting out objects, and saw that basically if we replaced everything that was blue by green objects, and if we replaced everything that was red by a kind of browny orange, we would actually create a slightly stylized world that still felt pretty real and still felt like the actual GDR. Our brilliant costume designer also made costumes to fit that and to fit into every individual set. Actually, that was an amazing thing, the communication between the costume designer and the production designer. They really worked for one another, and actually a few sets we changed based on a beautiful costume that the costume designer had come up with, and the other way around, of course, very often. We created a GDR which is, in a way, truer than the true thing. When Ulrich and I traveled, and Sebastian traveled through the former GDR, and presented that film there before it was released, people would come up to us and say, "Wow, it's incredible! It's exactly how it was, and you've so much managed to recreate that time." And that's because in our memories, things become stronger than they were, and so if there was a dominance of certain colors, those other colors we almost forget about. And so in a way we've created a GDR that is truer than the real thing, that is realer than the actual GDR, and I hope more beautiful. We didn't have the budget to build everything, so we shot on real locations everywhere. And so what we did is we made sure that the locations that we choose fit our color and shape concept. And very often that was pretty difficult to do. It's hard to find a theater that has absolutely no red in it. So basically that theater is assembled from 3 different places. We made sure that that every location had an authentic feel to it. And in some places it was almost unavoidable to have that real authenticity, like the Stasi archives. We were the only film team ever allowed to shoot in the actual Stasi archives. So that gigantic room that you see with all those filing cards is the actual room where all those millions of GDR citizens were registered, both the informers and the people they informed on. And that labyrinth of shelves with all the files in them, that's the real thing. It was a little bit scary to shoot there because it's just so enormous. We couldn't even capture the incredible size of it on film. I wanted the year 1984 to feel completely real, and in 1984 there wasn't much digital technology, so I didn't want there to be any kind of digital feeling to it. So even when we had to make some signs for shops on the street, I made sure they were actually made with the technology that was used in 1984, and of course, the actual shooting on film, that hasn't really changed since 1984. So of course, it was completely out of the question to shoot anything digital there. But also with the sound, I wanted it to have that special, warm analog feeling to it. But that was pretty complicated actually, because those analog tapes for the Nagra sound recording equipment, they no longer make those because everybody records digital. I found this old legend of a sound recordist and said, look, I'd really like to record this in analog, and he was very excited about the idea and said, look, I'll phone around with some of my old colleagues, maybe they still have tapes in their attic or in their cellars somewhere, and he did that, and we found a sufficient number of tapes to be able to do that, and he was very excited about it because he also felt that analog sound just has a different feel to it. I know there's a big dispute about this, and in these kind of double-blind trials, people were not able to tell the difference, even those who maintained that there was a difference. But I still think there's a difference. It's, he said that he'd done experiments with the rustling of leaves, and that he'd recorded that on analog tape and on digital, and that that beautiful sound of the rustling of leaves only sounded like rustling in the analog. In the digital, it would sound more like a kind of high-pitched clinking, sound, like glass or metal being hit together. And I agree with that, and I think you feel that also in the voices. Gabriel Yared, I knew him mainly from his score for the talented Mr. Ripley, which I think is one of the most beautiful scores in recent memory, and a very psychological music. It really made you understand the characters. That's what I loved about it. It's beautiful, and at the same time, it really helps you understand complex things. And he has this method that he wants to be involved before you start shooting. He says that basically when you compose music, since romantic music came about, music is in itself a kind of painting. You hear music and you see images in your head. And he says that he thinks it's almost cynical if you already see the finished images and then you create more images to go with those images. He said it's almost tautological. And then he really applied himself to the film, and I think you can hear it in the music. It's really it's a incredibly beautiful score, and some ideas in it are just so original, and like the love motif that we use in 3 points in the film is that was actually what he was most proud of. It's used in 3 scenes. Once when they unwrap the presents, you hear that da 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 la 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 la. That and that's actually all. That's all there is to it. It's just the repetition of that, and it's used there. And then in that other rare moment of somehow pure love between Dreimann and Christa, which is when she comes back from Hemp's appointment, from the appointment with the minister, and Wiesler reads this report and imagines what has happened. So there, in a slightly different orchestration, you hear that same motif. And then I did something which no one is going to notice consciously, but and they shouldn't, but which I hope on a subconscious level does work. It's only used once more, namely in the very, very final scene when Wiesler opens the book and finds this dedication to him, and then put it there once more in this very gentle form, played actually without a click. That was a very hard thing to do, to get it right in the tempo bit. I wanted the orchestra to play it completely free, because for me that expressed that basically, this was the first time that character, Wiesler, was experiencing, something close to love and appreciation. And that, while maybe we as the audience always hoped that the love would be there between Dreimann and Christa, or maybe even, between Wiesler and Christa on some weird level, we were looking in the wrong places. The actual axis of love was between Wiesler and Dreimann, and the most that love is ever fulfilled is in the moment that he discovers that dedication to him. Those are the kind of things you can discover and explore with a great and intelligent artist like Gabriel. You know, it just you know, nothing is too sophisticated for a man like that, and that was wonderful. Yeah. I searched all of, you know, the whole music catalog for a piece that would express that. It would have been great to use the Appassionata. I don't agree with Lennon. I don't think that that's Beethoven's best piece, and I don't think that the Appassionata, for me, it doesn't have that immediate impact and that great strength, and that the tenderness that I needed, and the anger at the same time. You know, all that I didn't find in the Appassionata, and in other pieces it was either they had already been used for other things and therefore would evoke other associations in people, or it would take too long for them to get to the point, you know, or to express what they were supposed to express. I needed, you know, it had to be pretty short. I didn't want this to become a music film, so it made sense to have Gabriel compose that. And Sonata for a Good Man was actually the thing that we had the most arguments about, Gabriel and I, because I had originally wanted it to be something more directly romantic and soul-filling, so to speak. You know, something that would really bring tears to his eyes, the way that that it does in the screenplay. And Gabriel always said to me, "Look, this is already what you want of from the rest of the music, from the actual score. This is music which is going to be, you know, which has to feel real. You know, don't make it too soft and too beautiful." And actually, the one that we used in the film, that was his first draft for that piece, which I, you know, found very interesting. But it sounded to me a little bit like, you know, young Alban Berg. A little too complicated, you know, a little too complex. I wanted it to be accessible for the audience, for me, and for a character who wasn't such an expert in music as Wiesler. But then Gabriel composed for me a beautiful piece, which was exactly what I wanted, you know, which was one of those things like the Clair de Lune's sonata, you know, that was just strikingly beautiful immediately, and I could see what he meant, that it was almost too sweet for that moment, that it was better for that scene to work on a psychological level, and for the music to feel real, and for this to feel like a real life experience. And you know, after a lot of trying out many things, I went with his original idea on that, and I think it works well, because it does feel like a music made out of a different texture from the rest. And Sebastian Koch, the actor, loved it, and although he couldn't play the piano, you know, he learned to play that piece beautifully, and Gabriel was actually pretty impressed with his interpretation of it. Learning to play the Sonata for a Good Man was an essential part for Sebastian Koch of discovering the character of Dreimann. He says that it was really while learning that is always it was almost like a meditation exercise to get into that character, and so I could see that, you know, he'd have piano lessons every day, and I mean, he only had to learn the first half of the sonata, because I knew I was going to, you know, in no matter what take, I would always pan out. As it is, I pan up pretty quickly. But even in the shot where I stay with him longest, you know, he would have only had to play the first half. But he wanted to learn the full thing, you know, he really wanted to play that. And still now, you know, it's really funny, because he's now bought this beautiful grand piano. And you know, people come to visit him and say, "Well, will you play something for us?" He says, "Yes, I will." And then he plays, you know, this incredible and wildly complicated piece of this sonata for a good man. People say, "Wow, my God, you're a wonderful pianist. Can you play something else for us?" No, that's all he can play. The great thing in Germany was that we got incredible reviews, and I think that that's what then turned the film into a commercial success too, because everybody was really skeptical whether people would go and actually see this film, because if you hear what it's about, you think, oh my God, this is going to be a pretentious piece of European complicated filmmaking, and maybe I'll watch it on DVD sometime, and then you end up never watching it, But the reviewers and the newspapers really didn't, just get their normal reviewers to write about it. They got great writers, mostly from East Germany, to write about this and to compare it to their own experiences and say what the film did for them. The reviewers really made it happen, that people would actually want to go and see the film. I hope that this film is also empowering, or let's say delivers some message of hope also. It is also a very dark thing for the German audience to watch, because we did what this film is about, and so I think that I could feel in the audience that there was appreciation that this story was being told, and told that way, but there was also a feeling of hurt there, and people remembered that hurt while watching the film. So in a way, here at these first few screenings that we've had in the US and in Canada, we've received much more straight love and appreciation for the film than we have in Germany, where it did incredibly well, and it was a really important film to so many people, but there were always mixed feelings about it because of the personal history that people had. If you talk in terms of messages, who was it? Some American director said, if you want to send a message, go to the post office. But I do think that films contain messages in some way, because I think that film, for me at least, when I watch films, it's a kind of therapy. It's for 2 hours the filmmaker becomes your therapist and will hopefully send you out of his cabinet with a feeling of a little more power, a little more hope. So of course that is the main thing, that I hope that people don't feel depressed by the film, but that they feel that it's given them something positive. But I think that one thing that it's worth thinking about is that I think in life there's a kind of axis along which you have to position yourself, and on one extreme of that is principle, and at the other end is feeling. And you have to decide for yourself whether you are a person of complete principle or a person of feeling. Both extremes are probably wrong. It's like you're confronted with a moral choice, and you say, no, I will not do this, I do not do things like that out of principle. Or you say, well, whatever feels right for me at this given moment, I do. Both positions are wrong, probably. The boring middle is where the truth lies. But we have to be aware of that. If you're a person of complete principle, you are like Lenin, who says, look, I realize that I have to fight for communism, and therefore I will shut out any feeling that I have from beautiful music, or from enriching encounters with people. I think it's always important to keep that window for feeling open, and to allow the feeling to come in, at least to some extent. And at the same time not to lose complete track of principles, because they're important in guiding us in moments of moral turmoil. So that would be something that I hope people would think about, but hopefully after having been just entertained by the film for 2 hours and 17 minutes.